Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Jefferson High School was known for its electric atmosphere and, unfortunately, for its reigns of terror. For months, a small group of hooligans had been ruling the roost: Derek Johnson, tall and brutal, always surrounded by his cronies, and Tony Miller, his cunning and provocative right-hand man. Together, they made all the new students tremble. No one dared to stand up to them, until the day Emma Williams arrived. Emma wasn't just a new student. Her neatly tied brown hair, piercing gaze, and calm posture belied the fragile air she displayed. She had grown up in a dojo, where discipline and courage had forged her character. Recently orphaned and placed with her aunt, she had come to Jefferson with a single goal in mind: to survive and never be intimidated. The day she arrived, the gym was filled with laughter, shouts, and wild movements. The hooligans' eyes fell on her as soon as she entered. Derek snickered, exchanged a knowing look with Tony, and stepped forward. The other students instinctively moved aside, some frightened, others curious. Tony took a step toward Emma, a cruel smile on his face, and shoved her lightly. Laughter erupted. But Emma stood there, motionless, as if every move the thugs made was swiping past her without effect. Her eyes shone with a cold, focused light, and it was this sparkle Derek hadn't anticipated. Barely a minute had passed since the initial contact. Emma deftly dodged another provocation, using Tony's imbalance to push him lightly. The hooligans' arrogant laughter turned into murmurs of incomprehension. The situation had changed, and now they were the ones wavering, unable to predict what would come next. In less than 60 seconds, those who thought they were humiliating her found themselves begging. The illusion of their superiority had been shattered. The gymnasium, filled with echoes of laughter and jeers just moments earlier, fell into a shocked silence. Emma Williams had just shown that she was not just another new girl, she was a force to be reckoned with. And that was just the beginning. Emma Williams walked through the doors of Jefferson High School with a slight apprehension, but her step was steady. The hallways were already bustling, groups of students were laughing, jostling, exchanging whispers and furtive glances. Emma scanned every face, noting alliances, tensions, and especially the leaders of each group. As soon as she entered the main hall, her eyes met Derek Johnson's. Tall, broad-shouldered, with that cruel smile that foretold trouble, he was surrounded by his cohorts. Tony Miller, shorter but just as intimidating, was glaring at her. Their presence dominated the space, and the students around them instinctively moved aside. Emma took a deep breath. She knew she had to make a good impression and stay calm. She walked to her locker, adjusting her bag on her shoulder, aware that all eyes were on her. The whispers began immediately: "She's the new girl. She looks fragile. We're going to have fun with her." Derek took a step forward, followed by Tony. They surrounded Emma like predators. Derek sneered and called out, loud enough for the nearby students to hear. "Well, what do we have here? A new girl who thinks she can survive here?" Emma didn't answer. She simply lifted her chin slightly, exuding an icy confidence that slightly unsettled Derek. Tony, impatient, tried to push her aside, laughing. Emma dodged skillfully, using their strength against them to back away without falling. A murmur ran through the students who were watching: "She wasn't afraid." And that detail changed everything. Derek, furious, punched the locker next to her, hoping to intimidate her. But Emma, with a quick and precise movement, blocked his path. Tony then tried to surround her from behind, but she spun around, avoiding his attack, and placed herself in front of Derek, cutting him off. Derek's acolytes took a step back, stunned. Emma wasn't smiling or shouting, but her presence commanded respect. A minute had passed, and the group that had thought they were humiliating her was already on the defensive. As Derek and Tony exchanged a surprised look, Emma simply whispered, almost to herself, "You always have to know who to underestimate, and who to respect." Jefferson High School had just witnessed Emma Williams's first silent demonstration of strength and determination. And for Derek and Tony, the day had just taken an unexpected turn. The next day, the Jefferson High School gymnasium was filled with laughter and the sound of bouncing balls, but there was a palpable tension in the air. Derek Johnson and Tony Miller had spent the night brooding over the previous night's humiliation. They couldn't let Emma Williams walk all over them without reacting. Emma, for her part, knew the day was going to be difficult. She entered the gymnasium with her bag slung over her shoulder, observing the students already training. She noted the strategic positions of Derek and his companions. Her experience in the dojo had taught her to read the intentions in the slightest movements, and she knew that the slightest mistake could be exploited. As expected, Derek stepped forward first, followed by Tony and two other members of their group. Derisive laughter echoed as they surrounded Emma. Tony threw a basketball at her, not playfully, but to provoke her. Emma dodged effortlessly, letting the ball slide across the floor and hit a wall behind her. Not bad for a newbie. Derek snorted, his eyes narrowing. But this is just the beginning, Tony added, a smirk playing on his lips. Emma remained calm. She knew that responding violently now would be reckless. Instead, she used her speed and precision to dodge every attack, every provocation. When Tony tried to push her to unsettle her, she spun slightly, throwing him off balance. The other students watched, mouths agape. Jake Thompson, a quiet but attentive comrade, whispered to his friend Sarah Lewis. "Did you see that? She's amazing." Sarah nodded silently, impressed by Emma's composure and determination. Derek, frustrated by his inability to touch or intimidate her, made a sudden move to surround her. But Emma anticipated his move, using Derek's strength to push him back slightly against his cohorts. The other students present began to murmur in admiration. Emma wasn't just fast and strong, she was strategic. After a few minutes, the dynamic had completely changed. Derek and Tony, who had planned to make this confrontation a spectacle of dominance, found themselves on the defensive. Their laughter turned into murmurs of incomprehension. For the first time, they realized that Emma Williams was not an easy target. As they backed away, panting and frustrated, Emma just watched them, impassive but determined. She knew this was only the first real encounter, but the message was clear: she would never be humiliated. And that message, the whole of Jefferson High School had just gotten. The next day after school, Emma knew Derek and Tony wouldn't let the previous day's humiliation go unchallenged. She had planned to stop by the gym to pick up her things from practice, but she could already feel the atmosphere thick with tension. The near silence in the hallway was a stark contrast to the usual hustle and bustle of the school. Derek and Tony were there, sitting on the benches, surrounded by their cronies. Their eyes shone with a combination of anger and excitement. They had decided to set a trap for Emma. When she entered, they stood up abruptly, blocking her path. "Well, look who's here," Derek said, his voice filled with contempt. Tony added with a cruel smile, "This time you won't get away with it." Emma took a deep breath and assessed the situation. She knew she was surrounded, but she knew the anticipation techniques she'd been taught. Her gaze quickly scanned everyone's position: Derek on the left, Tony on the right, two others behind, and an empty space in front of the door. Every move had to be precise. Derek made the first move to push her, but Emma dodged fluidly and, using her own strength against him, caused him to stumble slightly. Tony then tried to attack him from behind, but Emma quickly turned and knocked him into a bench. The other two henchmen backed away, hesitant, surprised by Emma's efficiency. The students who witnessed it, some hidden behind doors, whispered to each other, "She's incredible. How does she do that?" The surprise effect was total. Emma showed neither fear nor anger. Every movement was controlled, calculated. She moved with a precision that left the hooligans bewildered. Derek, furious, attempted a direct charge. Emma ducked at the last moment, and Derek found himself thrown against the wall. The others, shocked, began to instinctively back away. A minute later, the initial trap had backfired. The hooligans, humiliated and disoriented, were losing control. Emma, calm and implacable, made it clear that they could not dominate her. The gymnasium, which was supposed to be their playground, was now her space. As she gathered her things, Derek muttered under his breath, we've never met anyone like her." Tony nodded, still in shock. For the first time, the two leaders realized that Emma Williams wasn't just the new girl, she was a force they hadn't anticipated. And that day, the atmosphere in the Jefferson High School gym changed forever. Word about Emma began to spread, and everyone in the class realized she wasn't easy prey. The next morning, Jefferson High seemed peaceful, but an underlying tension hung in the air. Everyone was talking about what had happened in the gym. Emma Williams, the new student, had incapacitated Derek Johnson and Tony Miller with surprising skill. Whispers went back and forth in the hallways, some admiring, others incredulous. Emma, aware of the rumor, showed no arrogance. She walked calmly to her classroom, her back straight, her eyes carefully observing her surroundings. She knew that Derek and Tony hadn't forgotten about her and were still looking for a way to provoke her. During the lunch break, the two hooligans decided to strike again. This time, they chose a less public location, the sports court, surrounded by a few witnesses. Derek approached with a cruel smile. "You won't get out of this today." Tony nodded confidently, thinking the element of surprise would be on their side this time. Emma, however, showed no fear. Her years of training had taught her to remain calm and analyze every move. When Derek made the first move to push her, she dodged fluidly and tripped him against a bench. Tony tried to surround her, but she moved with impressive speed, using their strength to knock them off balance. The other students present began to gather, fascinated. Emma wasn't fighting for humiliation or revenge, she was simply demonstrating that no one could underestimate her. Derek's cohorts, who had come to support their leader, also found themselves trapped. A few precise movements were enough for Emma to temporarily disarm them and put them on the defensive. You can't." Tony stammered, panting. "I never claimed it was easy," Emma replied calmly, her gaze firm. Derek, furious and humiliated in front of the witnesses, backed away with a snarl. The other students, shocked, realized that this new girl was not only brave, but strategically brilliant and incredibly strong. Even those who had previously doubted her began to whisper to each other in admiration, "She's incredible." For the first time, Emma wasn't just standing up for herself, she was commanding respect. The bullies, who thought they could continue their reign, realized they'd underestimated someone extraordinary. The dynamic at Jefferson High had just changed, and everyone knew Derek and Tony wouldn't easily dominate again. Emma gathered her things and left the courtyard with the same calm confidence she had displayed from the start. The message was clear: underestimating Emma Williams would be a mistake no one could afford. The next morning, Jefferson High School was buzzing with rumors. Emma Williams wasn't just the new girl anymore, she was a household name. Students whispered in the hallways about how she'd taken down Derek Johnson and Tony Miller. Some looked at her with admiration, others with caution, but everyone knew her presence was changing the dynamic of the school. During break, Emma sat alone on a bench near the library. She wasn't looking for attention, but she felt curious eyes on her. That's when Jake Thompson and Sarah Lewis, two classmates who had observed the previous confrontations, tentatively approached. "Hey," Jake began, slightly hesitant. "We wanted to tell you, what you did in the gym, it was amazing." Sarah nodded, smiling. "No one expected that. You really handled Derek and Tony." Emma looked at them calmly, a small smile on her face. "Thank you. I'm not trying to show off, just not to be intimidated." Jake and Sarah exchanged a knowing look. "We were wondering." Jake continued, "Could you show us some techniques? Just so we know how to defend ourselves." Emma hesitated for a second, then agreed. "Okay, but only if you're serious. Discipline and focus are important, not just strength." A few days passed, and Emma began sharing self-defense lessons with Jake, Sarah, and other curious students. She showed them how to stay calm, anticipate moves, and use their surroundings to their advantage. Little by little, she gained the respect not only of her classmates, but even of some students previously intimidated by Derek and Tony. Derek and Tony, watching from afar, were furious. Their reign seemed to be crumbling, and every new ally Emma gained strengthened her position. But Emma wasn't looking to humiliate anyone. Her goal was clear: to show that courage and self-control could overcome fear and violence. For the first time since arriving, Emma felt like Jefferson High could become a place where she could not only survive, but also inspire those around her. And, in her heart, she knew that this support would be crucial for what came next: confronting Derek and Tony once and for all, and putting an end to their bullying. Derek Johnson and Tony Miller hadn't forgotten the public humiliation they'd suffered in the gym and on the playground. Every night, their minds revolved around the same idea: finding Emma and making her pay for what they considered an affront. But every time they tried to formulate a plan, the rumor of her strength and control intimidated them more. The following Monday, Derek called his group together in a secluded corner of the school to discuss strategy. "We can't keep letting ourselves be humiliated like this," he growled. "She's started to gain respect, this can't go on." Tony nodded through gritted teeth. "But how do we do that? She's fast, smart, she anticipates everything." Meanwhile, Emma continued her silent, precise training with Jake, Sarah, and a few other classmates. Every movement, every gesture, every technique she taught strengthened not only her own mastery, but also that of those who supported her. She knew Derek and Tony would be up to something, and she wanted to be ready. A few days later, Derek and Tony attempted an indirect confrontation. They provoked a small group of students in the courtyard, hoping to lure Emma away and set a trap for her. But Emma, anticipating their intentions, quickly intervened. She showed no fear. With icy calm, she disarmed their provocations without excessive violence, using their own aggression against them. Derek and Tony's cronies, accustomed to their dominance, were stunned. Taunts and threats no longer worked. Emma wasn't just trying to defend herself, she was imposing her strategy and logic. Every move the hooligans made was countered, every attempt at manipulation failed. Witnesses like Jake and Sarah realized that Derek and Tony were losing ground psychologically. The previously intimidated students began to support Emma, seeing her as a natural leader. The fear the hooligans once inspired gradually transformed into respect for Emma and her allies. That day, Derek and Tony had to admit, deep down, that they had underestimated the new student. Their silent revenge failed every time. Emma, patient and methodical, had begun to completely reverse the dynamics of Jefferson High. As she left the courtyard, a faint smile appeared on her face. She knew the real test would come soon, a final showdown where Derek and Tony would understand once and for all that Emma Williams was not just a student, but a force no one could match. The following Monday, the halls of Jefferson High were quieter than usual, but the furtive glances and whispers indicated a new tension. Since the recent clashes in the gym and courtyard, Emma Williams's reputation had spread like wildfire. Students spoke in hushed voices, each sharing their observations. "Did you see what she did to Derek?" Or, "She pushed Tony away in less than a minute." Even the most indifferent students couldn't ignore this new dynamic. Derek and Tony's former classmates, who had long followed their provocations without flinching, were beginning to hesitate before intervening. Fear mingled with respect. Emma, aware of this new reputation, didn't let it show. She continued to walk the halls with the same quiet confidence, exchanging a few words with Jake, Sarah, and other students who were beginning to approach her. Every smile, every friendly gesture reinforced her image not only as a strong woman, but also as a calm and thoughtful leader. Derek and Tony, seeing their influence waning, decided to strike again to try to regain control. They planned a public confrontation, believing Emma would be distracted by the crowd and that surprise would give them the advantage. But Emma, anticipating their maneuver, arrived in the gym before them and prepared a small strategy of defense and deterrence. When Derek and Tony entered, sure of their plan, they discovered that the dynamic had completely changed. Emma was ready. She positioned herself confidently, surrounded by a few classmates she had discreetly trained. Their arrogant laughter turned into confused murmurs. The students who had been hiding watched with admiration and excitement. Emma wasn't trying to humiliate Derek and Tony, she was simply demonstrating her control and composure. The attempts at intimidation failed once again, and this time, the entire gym realized that Derek and Tony had lost control of the situation. For Derek, Tony, and their cohorts, this psychological defeat was worse than any physical affront. Emma Williams, the new student, had transformed her reputation into a silent force capable of commanding the attention, respect, and even fear of others. That day, the rumor became reality. Emma was no longer the new girl. She was now a symbol of courage, strategy, and self-control. And Derek and Tony knew they would have to rethink their plan if they ever hoped to regain their authority. The atmosphere at Jefferson High School was electric that morning. Every student knew Derek Johnson and Tony Miller were planning something major to regain their dominance. Whispers ran through the halls, "They're going to try to trap her. Emma's ready, you'll see." The tension was palpable. Emma, calm and focused, had anticipated this day for several days. She knew Derek and Tony would stop at nothing to wash away their humiliation. With Jake, Sarah, and a few trusted comrades, she had developed a discreet strategy to control the situation. She wasn't looking for violence, but for precision, control, and control of every move. Lunchtime arrived, and the schoolyard became the scene of the confrontation. Derek and Tony stood in the center, surrounded by their cohorts, ready to impress the crowd and humiliate Emma once and for all. But Emma, a few feet away, calmly observed the scene, her allies strategically placed around her. Derek made the first move, a sudden movement to surround him. Emma dodged fluidly and used Tony's strength, as he tried to attack her from the side, to trip him slightly. The other acolytes found themselves off balance, unable to coordinate their attacks. The crowd, which had gathered, held its breath, fascinated by Emma's precision and calm. "You don't understand anything," she said in a firm but calm voice. "Underestimating someone only reveals your weaknesses." Derek, flushed with anger, tried to regain the initiative, but every move he made was anticipated and neutralized. Emma, with astonishing speed and strategic logic, turned the attack into a trap. The acolytes who had supported him moments earlier found themselves backing away, unable to react. A minute later, Derek and Tony were standing alone, panting and humiliated in front of the entire school. Students whispered and murmured admiring comments. The dynamic had completely changed. The former bullies were now at the mercy of the one they had tried to humiliate. Emma wasn't happy about their defeat. She knew that true victory was gaining the respect and safety of her comrades. Derek and Tony's cohorts began to understand that fear and violence no longer reigned here. When Emma left the courtyard, her head held high and her gaze calm, every student present knew that Jefferson High School had changed forever. Emma Williams wasn't just the new girl, she was now the role model, the silent force who inspired respect and admiration. After the final confrontation in the courtyard, Jefferson High School was abuzz. Students who had witnessed Emma's display of strength and poise spoke not only of admiration, but of inspiration. Her name was circulating in every hallway, every classroom, and even among the teachers. Emma, aware of her new position, left nothing to chance. She continued walking confidently, but this time she engaged in small talk with her classmates. Jake and Sarah followed her faithfully, along with a few other students who had begun to approach her after seeing her mastery of confrontations. The former bullies, Derek and Tony, had become cautious. Their arrogant attitude was gone, replaced by a constant tension. Even their cohorts now respected Emma, knowing that any attempt at provocation would not only be ineffective, but could backfire. Emma began organizing informal learning sessions for her classmates, teaching them simple self-defense techniques, but more importantly, how to remain calm in the face of fear and intimidation. In doing so, she not only earned respect, she created an active support network among the students. In the corridors, one could hear sentences like, "If Emma says it works, I believe her. I never want to be afraid of them again." Students who had previously been dominated by hooligans now felt able to defend themselves. Derek and Tony, seeing the loyalty and respect the other students showed Emma, began to realize that they had lost more than just physical dominance, they had lost their psychological influence over the school. Every admiring glance Emma gave her was a silent defeat for them. Emma, on the other hand, wasn't seeking revenge. Her victory wasn't about humiliating her former abusers, but about showing that courage, discipline, and strategy could transform a toxic environment into a space of respect and solidarity. This chapter of her life at Jefferson High School marked a turning point. The students understood that fear was not inevitable and that with the right attitude and self-control, everyone could stand up for themselves and inspire others. Emma was no longer just the new kid, she had become a symbol of strength and positive influence throughout the school. The weeks following the final confrontation brought a palpable change to Jefferson High School. The hallways, once dominated by intimidation and fear, now echoed with normal conversations and friendly exchanges. Students respected Emma Williams not only for her strength, but for the way she had inspired a spirit of courage and solidarity. Emma continued to walk confidently through the halls, but she was no longer alone. Jake, Sarah, and other classmates formed a small, caring, and responsible group of students, ready to support those facing bullying. Emma had transformed her own experience into a living example. Fear could be overcome, and respect could be earned through self-control and determination. Derek and Tony, on the other hand, had changed. Though proud and competitive, they now knew they could no longer intimidate or control anyone at Jefferson. The students who once feared them now viewed them with caution and sometimes contempt. Their reign of terror was over, replaced by a balance where everyone knew their place and gratuitous violence no longer had any place. One afternoon, as the sun shone across the courtyard, Emma stood on the bench where she had often chatted with Jake and Sarah. She looked around at the students helping each other, laughing, and sharing moments of connection. A small smile crossed her face. She knew she had done more than survive Jefferson. She had transformed a hostile environment into a place where courage and respect trumped fear. She thought back to her arrival, to the first moment the hooligans had thought they could humiliate her, and realized how much had changed. Every move, every decision, every strategic move had contributed to this new beginning. Jefferson was no longer the same high school. And Emma was no longer just the new girl. She had become a symbol of strength, wisdom, and quiet leadership. As the bell signaled the end of class, Emma stepped out of the courtyard confidently, ready to face whatever the future held. Rumors, bullying, and old hierarchies no longer held any power over her. Jefferson High School had just undergone a profound transformation, and everyone knew that this new era had begun thanks to a single student, Emma Williams.